Just waiting for the screen to come up. And there we are. Okay, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's a Thursday as this week is rolling right along, and we've got some stuff going on. So why don't we check this out and see what's happening. First off, I'm going to widen out to the national radar. And we do have the radar kind of busy here in the eastern part of the United States with rain and snow now that's breaking out across parts of southern Indiana into northwestern Kentucky. That precipitation extends into Pennsylvania. It's mostly rain on the northeast side of this that is now developing across eastern PA and on up into the Hudson Valley. But it's the main area that's back through West Virginia and Kentucky and southern Ohio that when it swings into my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, into southern New England late tonight, and this is with a cold front that's coming through, we're going to see a changeover to snow and rapidly falling temperatures. So it's going to be a quick coating to maybe a couple of inches in spots as those temperatures drop, and I would not at all be surprised to see some icing problems tomorrow morning for the morning rush hour in and around New York City and all areas nearby, because we're literally going to go from the 40s into the 20s, and in some cases tomorrow morning by 6 or 7 a.m. Areas north and west of the coast might be actually closer to 20. Then that is to me going to suggest that any precip that falls is going to freeze rather quick. So that's your wide view. Here is the tight view here, and we'll bring up, this is as of 6 o'clock Eastern time, so just in case you're tuning this in a little bit later, this is what the radar looked like at 6 Eastern time, but not too much happening at the moment. North of New York City, you got a band of some rain that's also heading into northwestern Connecticut. There was a little bit of snow and sleet in parts of northeastern PA. Much of that precip is light, but the main area is still west of this view. So let's take a look at where this is all going. As far as tonight is concerned, we're probably going to see more rain. There isn't, by the way, just to bring up the watches and warnings and advisories, when we take a look at what's going on with the Weather Service, you know, we've got a small area of winter weather advisories over a small patch in central Massachusetts and northeastern Connecticut. And we've got winter weather advisories up for parts of West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, and western Virginia. And in the northwest, we have winter weather advisories up for parts of northern Idaho and western Montana, and an area of winter storm watches up for north central Montana. So that takes care of the next weather system, and that's coming in. That's part of the energy that's going to be the weather event for Sunday. So let's now we're going to jump to the HRRR model, which, by the way, did not do too badly the other day on Monday, where some areas on Long Island got their surprise snowstorm with some 6 to 9 inch snowfalls in some places. Everybody else got a coating to a few inches. But we're going to pull the HRRR model up because that actually did pretty well with the last one, so maybe it'll do well with this one. You know, one of the things you always do in weather, you try to do anyway, is you try to find the model that has the hot hand and you kind of stick with it. Eventually the hot hand stops being the hot hand, and you know, when they sort of like playing musical chairs, you don't want to be around you know, when they have the last chair standing. So here's the HRRR model. I'm going to show you the tight northeast view first. We are at now 10 p.m. and the rain area is expanding, starting to see a changeover to snow by 11 p.m. in northwest New Jersey, northeastern PA, all snow there. And we'll move over to midnight and to 1 a.m. Come on, 1 a.m., where are you? All right, why did it stop? Oh, it stopped because this is the new HRRR. I got to go back one. This model comes out every hour. My fault. Okay, so this is the old run. So it looks like the new run's a little bit colder. We don't have enough of it out. So this is at 1 a.m. And then here we go, 2, 3 a.m. And you can see what happens by 3 a.m. It's forecast to have changed over to snow through most of New Jersey except the coast. Eastern Pennsylvania starting to change over parts of Long Island. By 4 a.m. it's snowing just about everywhere. It's snowing everywhere except for southeastern Massachusetts. Now, this cold air is coming in very quickly. We're going to see temperatures drop. As I said, we're going to be in the 20s by 7 a.m., at which point this is the 7 a.m. radar view as the HRRR season, and the snow is now out of New York City, all of New Jersey except the extreme immediate coast is getting ready to end, but still snowing a bit over Long Island and through central and eastern Connecticut, throughout much of central and eastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, down into southeastern New Hampshire and Maine, and that's 8, 9, 10, 11, up, that's as far as it goes. So this is at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Snowfall by this model, which also did better. It didn't do that well, but it did better than the others. So you can see what it's cutting out here. Basically a coating to a couple of inches through a pretty large area from northeastern Virginia all the way up into southern New England. And then you start to get into some 4-inch amounts, scattered 4-inch amounts over parts of western Mass, northwest Connecticut, even into the eastern part of New York State, maybe down into Dutchess County, northeastern Connecticut, around Hartford or so, and into central Mass. So this is kind of where that winter weather advisory is up. And then you have, it looks like 2 to 4 inches across the rest of Massachusetts, in around the Boston area, and then throughout much of eastern Maine. Also, you'll notice that the snow that's produced out of this in West Virginia, 4-inch plus amounts in the mountains here in West Virginia into southern Pennsylvania, and even into the mountains of western Virginia, western North Carolina. Looks like a few inches there. Lesser amounts as you get into Kentucky and into Tennessee and into southern Ohio. So this is all this is really, is a cold front, and that's it. The wider view of the HRRR, I'll put the precip on here again, and this is the, I want to see if we got how much of the latest run we have first. So that is loading and taking its time. Thank you very much. Gotta love it. Okay, here we go. So this is the latest HRRR, starting with 5 o'clock, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You can see the heavy bands of snow back in western Virginia, western North Carolina, and down into West Virginia. And then, of course, you got snow that's up in northeastern PA now and through upstate New York. And then that colder air comes in and changes it over to snow as that low moves out to the northeast. I just want to make sure that this is the latest model run I have. See how far of the 22Z we have. Okay, so we actually have now out to 3 a.m. On the HRRR. And the NAM model, you know, is about the same too. So look at 3 a.m. It looks like it changes over a little bit faster on this run. You're starting to see the changeover basically between 2 and 3 a.m. along the coast, and sooner than that in the inland spots. One of the things I think will happen with this is the fact that you've got a rather convective nature. There's some very strong vertical motions being generated by the NAM model during the overnight period. So I think there's going to be some convective, there's going to be a convective nature to this, and there might be some bursts of heavy snow in some places and not so in others. So I would look for some variation in the total snow amounts. And you can look at the 2-meter temperatures here and how they fall. Let me back up one. So there's your freezing line, which seems to be coming a little faster on the very latest run, but we don't have it out all the way. But by 7 a.m., the freezing line is all the way, you know, it's all of Long Island below freezing, all of New Jersey except the southeast. And notice that just inland of the coast, it's in the mid and upper teens and lower 20s on the Connecticut coast. So anything that comes in I mean, in terms of what falls, with temperatures dropping into the mid-20s rather quickly from 40s where they are now, I think any standing moisture is going to freeze. So again, if you're in this area and you're watching and you're planning your Friday morning commute, just give yourself a little bit of extra time. Sometimes these coating to a couple of inch events under certain circumstances could be a whole lot worse than a bigger snowfall because it's very deceptive. And you might be driving tomorrow morning with a little layer of ice underneath whatever snow falls on top of it, and you won't be aware. And by the way, notice the temperatures in much of southeastern Canada, 10 to 20 below zero. This is where our air is coming from. This is a quick shot of very cold air that is going to be coming in for Friday and for Saturday, and I'll move it on the NAM model, and there are your temperatures for the overnight, Friday night into Saturday. But this cold air, by the way, is in and out pretty quick. 6, 7, 12. So this is the morning temperatures. So it's basically single digits and teens. You get down to low single digits and below zero as you get into northern New Hampshire and Vermont and on up into Maine. But again, it's a quick shot of cold air that we're dealing with because the next weather system is already knocking on the door, and there's no blocking to speak of, so there really isn't anything to hold that cold air in, nor do we have, you know, we've been talking about this negative East Pacific oscillation, which we are in the process now of going into, but we're early in the game on that. It's not, that index is not negative enough yet, like it was back in December, where the cold air just basically overwhelmed everything in the eastern U.S. We're not quite there yet. Now here's our next weather system for Sunday, which is increasingly looking to me like not a big deal. We are going to see some snow ahead of it, but notice that the lower pressures, the models are emphasizing the lower pressure that's in the northern part of the jet rather than in the south. So this is going to pull up warm air. The high goes out off the Virginia coast. You've got a southwest flow initially, which is not a warm wind this time of year, but eventually that goes more southerly, and that's when you start to get that warmer air. So a quick shot of snow and then a change over to rain near the coast, maybe a bit more snow inland. But notice with the emphasis more on the northern low and not a situation where you've got a primary and then a secondary low, you're going to probably see this rain ending fairly early. In the meantime, snows might be more along the lines of central and upstate New York and on up through northern New England, interior New England, and not so much in the coast. I think, but may change over to rain through much of Maine. And notice here comes the next one. This is for the middle of next week, and again the same problem. There still isn't enough of that negative EPO to have cold air overwhelm. Some of the models are a little flatter with this, but some aren't, and I think until we get that negative EPO established, it's going to be kind of tough. The European, as we go to the end of next week, when a third weather system comes out, this one the GFS takes to our west, but the European has a much flatter looking low that goes out off the mid-Atlantic coast. So we'll see if that's right or wrong. As of so far this winter, we know that the European has not performed very well at all. So why don't we go to the upper air pattern and take a look at what's happening. We're still kind of in the same place we were yesterday with the indices. And one of the problems here is, yeah, the PNA is going positive, but you see where the ridge is? The ridge is off the west coast, and we mentioned that, when we talked about the fact that you got to get this ridge, if you want that colder weather to really overwhelm the east down into the mid-Atlantic states, you got to get that ridge inland of the west coast, because that shifts the trough closer to 80 and puts that cold air down and holds it there to some degree. Meanwhile, the other thing that's happening is, if you think back to mid-December, mid-January, we talked about the fact that there was a deep trough at 160 west, okay, that was running from the Aleutians down to Hawaii. The upper trough is there, but it's set up a little bit further to the west this time around by a handful of degrees. but you kind of need that to shift eastward to get that trough near 160, because that'll force this ridge to go inland. And until it does, we're going to have problems here in the east with holding on to cold air with these storms. Now, notice the vortex there. It's pretty obvious and pretty powerful. You get trough after trough that swings around. As we move into the middle of the month, you finally start to get that ridge to try to come into the west coast. You can see it here. This is now at February 10th. Still getting deep troughs. But you see how the trough dives down? It bottoms out more near 90 west rather than near 80 or 85. I would take 85. At this point, here's your upper high running now inland of the west coast. So now you got it by day 10 where you would want it. But you know, after that, there's some ambiguity as to where this is all going to go. One of the things that's happening is, and I mentioned yesterday that I said maybe toward the late part of February and going into March, we could see the NAO become a player for the first time this winter season. And based on what I'm seeing right now, I'm going to stick with that prediction. And perhaps what we may see for a little while as we get into mid-month is that the upper air pattern kind of transitioning over into where the NAO becomes more important. So I want to see where it evolves with this. You still have a strong ridge along the west coast, so you'll have a positive PNA here. You'll probably have a slightly negative EPO. It may wind up being a little colder than what this upper air would suggest. This isn't a blowtorch by any means. It would probably mean temperatures back to seasonal, maybe a little bit above on some days and a little bit below in others. What we have right now is causing these cold air masses, these cold shots are pretty cold, but they just don't last. Now, in the meantime, while all this is going on, Europe, and if you think back to December, the same thing happened in December. Europe had some very cold air, and we've got this deep trough in Western Europe from Scandinavia down into Spain, and that northerly flow that comes from Greenland and the Arctic. Now, as we move through this weekend, it looks like some kind of storm that drops southward from Iceland down across England and southward into Spain. You can see that upper low there. Then a bit of a ridge builds in, and we are still have deep troughing here in Western Europe. The flow is coming from the cold regions up to the north in the Arctic over the North Sea, and then you get into a stronger ridge at this point. Now we're at day 9, and beyond that, ridging comes into play here, which will probably mean some warmer temperatures. But late in the period, like yesterday, it does bring down a very deep upper low into Europe from the north, and this is going to establish a strong northerly flow of cold air into Western Europe. So it'll be interesting to see, what this means from the standpoint of snow, which we'll take a look at on the surface map here. We do have these weather systems going by. It looks like the one for this weekend is mostly a rain event, and then you get into some of that colder air coming in off the ocean, producing some snows over England and Ireland early next week. Then a break, and then another surge of slightly colder air. Then remember, we get into those ridge positions for a little while. And then here's the cold blast starting at about day 11 and 12. Look at this large area of snow, all being generated by that flow from the Arctic. Very, very strong northerly flow running from the Arctic regions of northern Greenland down across the North Sea into France, Germany, northern Italy. It's like a large area of snow here as we look out into the long range. So right at the time where our pattern's kind of relaxing a little bit and maybe going through another transition, it's going to get very, very cold in Western Europe. So that's where I think you see that difference in how weather tries to play when we move these chess pieces around the board. So lots to look ahead to. I'm not particularly bearish or bullish overall. I try to take these things one at a time. Now by the way, here's the Weather Services just for my neck of the woods. They just upgraded this 1 to 2 inches for all of Long Island, northeast New Jersey, southern Connecticut, through the Hudson Valley. And let me see if Mount Holly did the same thing. If I can find the Mount Holly map, which is somewhere here. I lose these things with all these Brady Bunch windows. I got to organize it a bit better, but you can see me right there. Well, I can't find the Mount Holly map. I do have the Teleconnections, so we can bring that up. And here are the Teleconnections. And we've got that, you see that strong positive PNA. You also see a very strong, almost off the wall NAO going positive around February 7th through the 9th, and then starting a descent toward the neutral line. Okay, so that might be the beginning, maybe, of that change, that change maybe toward late this month, that we could get into a negative North Atlantic oscillation and get some blocking. And you can see the EPO index, it's negative, and it gets almost to minus 200, which is fairly strongly negative. But during December, we were down at minus 400, minus 500 on this index. It was extremely negative, and that probably is, and that is the reason why we saw those cold air masses get as far south as we did. Well, it's negative, but it's not overly negative. So, at least from the standpoint of what the teleconnection chess pieces are here telling us today, is probably the reason why we're getting these weather systems where we get these shots of cold air in the east. They last maybe a day or two at most, and then we warm up and rain for most of the area until you get the until we get a few more things to happen here with regards to getting these teleconnections to adjust. And remember, by the way, they change. The which is going to bring me to a bigger point, and that is this. So, I've seen it post many times, the fact that, people criticize the shorts. It's really funny because a few of these people were trying to have it both ways. And I'm not laying a criticism down, I'm just making an observation here. But I have folks that routinely criticize the models and how poorly they behave and how we shouldn't use them. And yet those same people are looking at some long-range models that are showing, might be showing that the overall pattern in the east may break down, and they put faith in that. Well, the same models that produce the short range also work on the long range. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that it's okay to criticize one end of the equation and not the other. How can you trust how can you say you can't trust the short range, but for some reason you trust the long range? It makes no sense to me. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. That's why I don't get really too hung up with all of this with regards to when I see models do things in the long term, because of the fact that you do wind up seeing models adjusting and changing as we go forward. And I think, the best and smartest thing we can do is keep an open mind on all of this. David Schwartz, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it. That's going to get me a cigar, which I'm going to get one right after we're done with this live stream today. Thank you. And I'm just running back because I want to see you see what's happening. Adam Fitz going to have many underperforming storms these next 2 weeks. Well, that depends. I think it depends on where you are, and let's not prejudge, okay? Because, remember, the January 4th blizzard basically came out of nowhere. So let's not prejudge. David Schwartz, you swear one day you'll understand the teleconnections and how they change so often and radically. The teleconnections are based on what the models do. The ones I show you are based on the GFS ensemble. So if those models change, and they're only run once a day, by the way, at 0Z, if those models change one way or the other, then the teleconnection forecast is going to change. So they go hand in hand. No matter which ones you use, if you use that one, if you use the one that's based on the European, the same thing as those. There were a number of times where the European teleconnection readings conflict with the with the ones that the ensemble mean puts out. And of course, each member puts out its own forecast as well, which makes it even more complicated. One of the things I've learned that with these things, they're tools. They are not, remember, they are none of the stuff that we use, whether it's the HRRR model, the NAM model, the GFS, the European, the Canadian, the Teleconnections, all of that. These are all tools. None of them are magic bullets. Let's throw the Mad-Julian oscillation in there. None of these things are magic bullets. You can't depend on one. You try to grab the one that has the hot hand and you work with it. I remember a number of times over the last couple of years in some of the snowstorms that we had, there were arguments made about the fact that, well, you can't have snowstorms in the east because the teleconnections are not right. And yet somehow in those instances it did find a way to produce moderate to heavy snowfalls in some places. Well, what happened? Well, for whatever reason, the teleconnections didn't work the way they normally do. All models work well most of the time. Some of the time they don't, and sometimes it turns out that all of them are not working well at the same time, if you follow my logic. So use them as tools from day to day. Try to focus more on the fact is which one is giving you the most consistency. The EPO has been consistently showing negative readings for quite a while now for this period that we're into. So we seem to be getting a reliable signal with that. The P&A has been kind of going back and forth. The last couple of days it's been showing that it's going strongly positive. The NAO is shown to be strongly positive with not much change. So, you know, we see what those indices are telling us. And then at the end of the day, you got to look at the day-to-day weather and how everything plays out. Look at this surface low that's coming out for Sunday. Now, instead of coming up, you know, traveling across the Gulf states, the primary low is where most of the energy is going to be, and the low is going to go by pretty much to the north. In fact, the NAM wants to take it across from northeastern Iowa to northern Michigan into southeastern Canada. So that's you know, that's a problem. Patricia Patrolak, yeah, you know what it is? It's not just, it's the room I'm doing this in, it's very dusty and needs to be cleaned, and that's making my nose sound the way it is, because as soon as I go outside, I'm fine. So, but I appreciate it. Chicken soup and garlic. I'm actually going to have that tonight for dinner. Will Wilkes-Barre get snow on Super Bowl Sunday? I think snow, there will be snow in northeastern Pennsylvania out of this at the start. Same for northwest New Jersey and the Hudson Valley and interior Connecticut. But I think eventually everybody's going to go to rain with all of this, with the system for Sunday. Let's see, who wants it to be 1,000 below zero on the day of the Super Bowl? Well, the thing is, it's in Minnesota. They're playing it in the dome, so it doesn't matter. And that EPO is trending toward neutral, but that again was on last night's run. That doesn't mean that tomorrow's ensembles, it could go back to being strongly negative. So you just have to kind of look at it from day to day. I have not seen any Super Bowl commercials yet, Jimmy Anderson, but I will start looking for them. Tom Adams, how do I feel about naming of winter storms? I think it's ridiculous. You know, I think the idea of naming, what's the criteria going to be? And then look at what happened on Monday, where there was 6 to 9 inches of snow over a small geographic area that happened to be where I was. Do you name something like that? I don't know. What's the point? I don't see the point. Hurricanes, I do see. You know, there's a good reason to name those, and that's fine. And that's been something that they've been doing since the early 50s. Okay, but with winter storms, they're just selling points. They're just selling points, and I don't see the need for it. I'm not a fan. That's my opinion. Tom Adams, February looks like a real disappointment. Okay, it is February 1st. All right, Tom, February 1st today. Give it time. I don't know where this is going to go. Maybe it will be a disappointment if you're a snow lover. I don't know that. But you can't reach that conclusion now on the first day of February. Come on. You would have said that on January 1st, and 4 days later you had a blizzard over the coastal areas. And I thought January was actually a pretty decent winter month for much of the Northeast, in my opinion, even with the thaw in the second half. And in that thaw pattern, I still wound up with a good shot of bonus snow. Joshua Pan, HRRR accurate for tonight's cold front. Well, I think I think it did well on Monday, so I'm going to want to use it today. I think what it has makes sense. It matches up with the NAM, and even the GFS on the late afternoon run was a little bit more robust with its precip for the overnight. Yeah, I think that you're going to see short periods of moderate to heavy snow, some bursts in some places, some convective bursts. The NAM shows it, the HRRR shows it, the GFS shows it, the soundings show it, the soundings show it. Also, those temperatures falling very quickly during the early morning hours. This will be down in the 20s by the time this precip is over with, so there will be some icing going on. David Schwartz, where did we end up average temperature-wise for January after the big freeze and the warm-up? They basically almost, but not quite, canceled each other out. Most of the areas of the stations around New York City finished a degree or less below average for the month. I haven't really scoped the areas further west and north and south. I would tend to think that the areas in the south were much more below average than here. But on the whole, this is the third consecutive month now of below average temperatures in November, December, January. So we'll see where it goes. Thank you, Tom Adams. Yes, easy, okay? Easy. It's the first day of February. All right. How much are we looking at snow-wise for Garo Vestas, northeastern, northern New Jersey? If you're talking about tonight into tomorrow morning, between midnight and 7 a.m., a coating to a couple of inches. It's going to be variability. Sunday, you know, I think if a precip comes in fast enough, it could start off as snow for a short time and then go over to rain. Maybe a coating to an inch or so. I'm just not very bullish on Sunday. You got slightly above average temps for January. That's quite possible. The bulk of the below average temperatures were more to the south than they were to the north. In spite of all the cold, and I guess in spite of all that long stretch of days with temperatures well below normal and below zero, the second half of the month might have compensated for that. But you know what? I can give that a quick check. Let me just take a look here. While I have you on, I'll check Albany and see what they came up with. Climate, past weather, and Albany. See what their monthly summary says. Okay. So the average high in the month for Albany, so it was a little bit above average for Albany. The mean temperature for the month was 23.3, while the average is 22.6. So there was 0.7 of a degree above average for Albany. That's interesting. Why don't we? Might as well pull up New York City and see what they had. So for New York City, we had, and I'm going to use Central Park, and okay, they haven't put out their monthly summary, so I'm going to use off the preliminary, which is not final. Okay, so for New York City, just under 1 degree below average, 0.9 below average. Islip, which is near me, 0.5 degree below average. Newark, 0.7 of a degree below average. Okay, so let's check Philadelphia. Let's go down further south, and we'll look at Philadelphia. All right, so Philadelphia averaged 0.2 of a degree below average. Allentown, Pennsylvania, 0.5 degree above average. Very interesting. Wilmington, Delaware, 1.1 degree below average for Wilmington, Delaware. Let's go down a little further. I'm going to go to, let's look at Norfolk. And Norfolk was 2.2 degrees below average. Elizabeth City, North Carolina, 4 degrees below average. You start to see the bigger departures as you go further to the south. So basically much of the east was near or below average for the month of January. Very interesting with those numbers. And as cold as that first half was, you know, the second half of December kind of made sure that December was going to turn out to be below average, and the first half of January was well below average, only to get those 60 degree days for the second half. Dulles was below average. Okay, great. Thanks, Joshua. Really appreciate that. Gettysburg, 7.7 inches of snow so far this year. You know, Tech Man, I got to tell you, you go just west of Philadelphia, definitely, you know, there's a big snow hole going on over that part of Pennsylvania and extending southward from there. So, you know, there's always variability in all of this. And, you know, last year, if you were mainly north of from central New Jersey northward, you had above normal snowfall. If you were central New Jersey southward, you had below average snowfall. Still plenty of time here. Remember, we still have all of February and all of March to go through. Patrick B, are the Great Lakes frozen over? I don't know. I'll have to check on that, but I don't know. And James Hines, 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above average for Nova Scotia. So that was quite a warm departure. And Joshua Pan, only 0.4 of an inch of snow at Dulles last month, and that was even lower than last year. Yeah, you know, there's never any guarantees with all of this. You could have the best pattern in the world, the best teleconnections in the world, and if the troughs don't line up at the right place at the right time, you could still wind up not getting the outcome that you might like. That's just the nature of winter. It's always going to be some variability, and there's always going to be places that are going to get a lot, and the places they get very little. It seems like it seems as if it's feast or famine. And if you look at some of the numbers, that's usually how it works out. There's not a whole lot of years where the snowfall is close to average. It's either you know, way above or way below. All right, folks, going to call it a night at this point. I hope everybody had a great day today. Thank you again, David Schwartz, for nailing the super chat button. I really appreciate it. We're going to have a live Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi show on Facebook tonight at 9:15, the Joe and Joe show. So do tune us in on my Facebook page, which you can link to right from my YouTube channel. There's a link on the top of the channel page banner to Facebook, to my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, to my Twitter account. So you can join me on all those platforms. If you're new to my YouTube channel and watching me for the first time, welcome aboard. Thank you for being here. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is absolutely free. And we do these live streams at least once a day and multiple times during storm situations in the Northeast. So make sure you put on that notification button, so this way when these live streams hit, you will be you'll know, and you can come on and join the conversation. And I like the fact that everybody gets involved in the conversation. All right, have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.